welcome to the next tutorial in a series of tutorials for the Lampy console. In this tutorial we will talk about the values view. The values view in the home screen is the central point in the console where fixture parameter values are adjusted. Although altering fixture parameter values is best done from within the values view in the home screen, it is possible in every view of the home screen using the encoders or at any time using presets. If you have a console with a Lampy dongle or 2UNIVERSE console and an external monitor attached, you can modify fixture values anytime by using presets on the external screen. The Lampy groups fixture attribute values in a sensible way by dividing them into separate attribute groups, as well as attribute subgroups, but we will come back to these later, like intensity, position, color, gobo, beam, and special. These attribute groups can be accessed anytime by using the corresponding keys on the front panel of the console, or by using the drop-down in the home screen when you have fixtures selected. The values view is sometimes also called the programmer. The programmer always takes precedence over playbacks and scenes. This way you may always, at any point in a show, modify the look on stage by overriding the playback and scene output. To open the values view, make sure you're in the home screen and then click on the values button. Alternatively, you may also repeatedly click on the home screen button until you reach the values view. Within the values view, there are three different states of values that behave differently. So let's select some fixtures. We can do so by switching to the fixtures view or the groups view. Now you can see that we have fixtures selected and you see values displayed in a light gray color. This is how the programmer looks like if you have fixtures selected but no values assigned to them. The values that are shown are being output by playbacks, or it's the fixture's default values set by the library. Let's set some fixture values. We can do so by just turning the dimmer encoder. Now we see something changed in the values table. The dimmer cells of the selected fixtures are now displayed with a red background color and a red foreground text color. This shows how the programmer looks like if you modified, or as we also say touched, values of an attribute in the programmer. Now the programmer takes precedence over playback and scenes for all attributes with values in the programmer. As soon as the values are touched like they are right now, they can be recorded. You can directly record them into playbacks, scenes, executors, or just as presets for later use. Whenever there are values in the programmer, as it takes precedence over playbacks, the programmer needs to be cleared in order to allow these playbacks to come through again. We can do so by pressing the clear key on the front panel. If you have touched values, the first press will deactivate these values. This is also the third state of values in the programmer. In the value view, you can see how the programmer looks like if you have fixtures selected with values assigned to them, but they are not touched. The programmer still takes precedence over playbacks and scenes for the attributes with values in the programmer. These values are indicated by a red text color on the default background color. However, these values would not be recorded if we were to record playback or a scene. Let's press the clear key again. Now you can see that our values view is in the first state that we explained before again. Fixtures are selected, but no values are assigned to them. Let's press clear a third time. Now we're back to normal, without any fixtures selected in the values view. Next up, let's have a look at the programmer buttons in the top. Let's select some fixtures, assign a dimmer value, and a color to them. Let's just assign some pan and tilt value. Let's have a look at the first button in the top left of the main toolbar. It is called the blind button and it's indicated by an icon showing an eye. Whenever blind is active, it will hide the programmer content. The second press will show the content again. This is very useful if you want to make modifications live during a running show, but you don't want them to be output. The second button is called the highlight button. It is indicated by a light bulb icon. Highlight sets the selected fixtures to the highlight value defined in the library. This is usually no color, dimmer at 100% brightness, no gobos, etc. etc. The second click will deactivate the function. Highlight is very useful for focusing. The next two buttons are called Previous Fixture and Next Fixture. They step through selected fixtures in the defined order. So, Previous Fixture will step through the fixtures in backward order, whereas Next Fixture will step through the fixtures in forward order. If you hold the Shift key on the front panel of the console and press the Previous Fixture button, all fixtures of the selection set will be selected. If you hold the Shift key while pressing the Next Fixture button, the console will toggle between even and odd fixtures. Let's go back to our previous selection by pressing the Previous Selection button. Let's have a look at the Values action dialog. We can open it by clicking on the Magic Wand button. The first function in here is called Show Raw Values, and if you activate it, the programmer will show raw DMX values instead of the predefined ranges. The second button is called Link Attributes. When Link Attributes is turned on, which it is by default, whenever you touch the tilt encoder, pan would be touched as well. This also applies to colors. So whenever you touch red, green or blue, the other parameters will be selected as well. This is to make sure that you are always touching every of these linked parameters and hence always get the same color or position. However, it can be turned off by deactivating the Link Attributes function, which is useful if you want to store red, green and blue separately. Let's dig a little bit deeper into setting fixture values. On the Lampy, there are multiple ways to set fixture values. The most obvious of these ways is to use the encoders. Whenever you have a fixture selected, you can just turn the encoder to adjust the selected attribute. As we learned before, we can switch between attribute groups by pressing the intensity, position, color, gobo, beam, or special buttons on the front panel. In case one of these attribute groups has sub-attribute groups, we can select them either directly from the top toolbar or by pressing the attribute group button repeatedly. As you probably noticed, the OLED displays above the encoders always show the current function of the encoder. Let's switch back to position. Sometimes it might be necessary to adjust fine values of a position or another parameter. To adjust fine values, you can simply press the Shift key and the encoder readout will change to fine. Another very useful function is to fan or spread values. It distributes values across a range of fixtures. Fanning values may be applied to any fixture attribute and also to most effect attributes. To activate fanning for an attribute, press the fan key on the console's faceplate. The encoders will now add fan to the attribute label. The fan function remains active until you press the button again. Let's have a look at what fan does. To do so, let's go to the Groups view and select our backdrops fixtures first. You notice that even though I am in the Groups view, my encoders still show pan and tilt. Now let's press the fan key on the front panel and turn the pan fan encoder. Next, let's select the Midras fixtures. Last but not least, let's select the floor fixtures to create a position. Now let's have a look at how to set color mixing attributes. For this, let's select all of our fixtures again and turn off highlight. Let's change to the Values tab and change to the Color attribute. Inside the Values tab Color attribute, you will find 3 special methods to enter values. First is the color picker. You can choose any color by simply clicking until you found the color that you like. The next option is the color faders menu. Within the color faders menu, you have different sliders with different color mixing systems to adjust the color to your liking. Next up is the Quick Colors menu. The Quick Colors menu contains some buttons of some most used colors. They come in different levels of saturation and can be very useful to quickly select colors. Another option is to use the color attribute, which would be the color wheel, or the CMY color mixing. If you have RGB fixture selected, RGB is a different sub-attribute group. With the table being shown, you can simply use your encoders again to create your colors. Last but not least, you can also set values using the Set Value dialog. This is available via pressing the encoder for the equivalent attribute. If no ranges are defined for an attribute, you will be shown a keypad. This keypad always enters the value in %. The keypad also allows you to do some more sophisticated fanning. Let's switch to the Gobo parameter. Whenever ranges are defined in the library, instead of a keypad, the Set Values dialog will show you buttons and previews of the corresponding function. So for example, to select a Gobo, now we can simply click on it. Of course, you can still use the encoder. The Set Value dialog also contains some other useful functions. These can be found in the top row of the Set Value dialog. The first button, Default, will set the fixture to its default values for the selected attribute. The second button will deactivate the values. The third button will off this attribute. That means this attribute will be completely removed from the programmer. The fourth button, called Off Effects, will stop all effects for this attribute currently running in the programmer. There's a Load Output button, which will load the current output for this attribute, and there is a Load All Output button, which will load all attributes for this fixture into the programmer. Please note that these load functions will load the current output without any effects. Should you wish to load the whole fixture output, including any effects running, you can simply press the Shift key and keep it pressed, and then press the Edit key on the front panel. You can also load complete attribute groups into the programmer by pressing the Edit key on the front panel and the corresponding attribute group button on the front panel. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial, and I hope to see you again next time when we will talk about presets.